My name is Maya. I'm 35 and I run one of the most successful crisis management firms in the country. But to my family, I'm just the single mother who threw her life away. At my sister Emma's extravagant baby shower, her mother-in-law mocked me in front of everyone. Emma laughed and said, "At least my baby will actually have a father." My own mother chimed in, calling me a complete failure. I stayed perfectly quiet, but my 12-year-old son Leo stood up, looked right at my brother-in-law and asked, "Uncle Daniel, should I tell them about your other family in Seattle?" The entire room went dead silent. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Smash that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to put a toxic family member in their place. Let me take you back 30 minutes before that explosive moment. The afternoon sun poured through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of Emma and Daniel's sprawling suburban mansion. The driveway was packed with luxury vehicles, a clear testament to the flawless image my sister and her husband fought so hard to maintain. Emma had always been obsessed with appearances. Inside, the house was a sea of pastel balloons, catered champagne, and towering floral arrangements. Catering staff circulated with silver trays of caviar and imported cheeses, while a live string quartet played softly in the background. It was less a baby shower and more a networking event for Daniel's elite friends. I had spent the entire morning debating whether to even show up. My PR firm handles scandals for politicians and billionaires, meaning I'm used to navigating hostile territory. But family gatherings have always been my most difficult battlefield. I walked up the grand stone steps with my son Leo by my side. Leo wore a neat button-down shirt and held his head high. He has always been mature for his age, intelligent, calm, and incredibly protective of me. I wore a tailored emerald green suit, carrying a custom-wrapped gift box containing a vintage silver rattle I had spent weeks tracking down. I wanted to show my sister that despite our differences, I still cared. I didn't expect a warm welcome, but I thought we could at least maintain civility for one afternoon. Before I could even cross the threshold into the main living room, Patricia blocked my path. Patricia, Daniel's mother, was a woman who wore her entitlement like a suffocating perfume and wielded passive aggression like a surgical scalpel. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my suit with a mix of surprise and immediate disdain. She couldn't comprehend how I could look so polished. Without even a basic greeting, she shoved a bulky plastic garbage bag into my free hand. It was heavy, smelling faintly of mothballs and damp basement. I looked down at it completely confused. Patricia smiled, a cold, practiced expression designed for an audience. She raised her voice, making sure the nearest group of guests stopped their conversations. "I was just cleaning out my attic," she announced brightly, "and I thought of you right away, Maya. I know how difficult things must be for a single mother trying to make ends meet. I figured you could use some hand-me-downs." She paused, letting her eyes dart toward her wealthy friends. "Our family feels a deep Christian duty to help the less fortunate, especially underprivileged single black women. We know how you girls can struggle to clothe your children without a man around. Please don't be embarrassed to accept our charity." Patricia didn't just stop there. She reached out and patted my son's head as if he were a stray dog. "You know," she continued, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "Daniel and Emma are setting up a college fund for their baby today. It's so important for children to have a solid financial foundation. I'm sure you worry about Leo's future constantly seeing as he doesn't have a father figure to provide for him. Perhaps if you ask nicely, Daniel might have some extra landscaping work for you at his office building. We believe in teaching the value of hard work." The blatant racism and classism hidden behind her sweet tone made the air in my lungs turn to ice. Several guests turned to stare, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I felt Leo stiffen beside me, his small hands clenching into fists. I placed a calming hand on his shoulder, keeping my own voice perfectly steady. "Leo is 12, Patricia," I reminded her, my tone polite but firm. "He outgrew baby clothes a decade ago. I'm afraid we have no use for this." Patricia just waved her manicured hand dismissively, an ugly smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, don't be so proud," she said loudly. "You can always take them down to a flea market and sell them for extra grocery money. Every dollar counts when you're in your situation, right? Just consider it a blessing and take it." My fingers tightened around the handle of my custom gift box. The sheer audacity of this woman was staggering. I turned toward the large entryway trash can, fully intending to drop the insulting bag where it belonged. I wasn't going to cause a screaming match, but I certainly wasn't going to carry garbage around my sister's party. But before my fingers could let go, a hand gripped my wrist with stinging force. It was my mother, Beatrice. She had materialized out of the crowd, wearing a wide, frantic smile directed at Patricia, while her fingernails dug painfully into my skin. She yanked my arm away from the trash can. "What do you think you're doing, Maya?" she hissed through clenched teeth, her voice low but laced with venom. "Don't you dare come into your sister's beautiful home and act ungrateful." I stared at my own mother in disbelief. "Mom!" I whispered, trying to pull my arm free. "She just handed me literal garbage and insulted our entire community. Are you seriously going to defend her?" Beatrice didn't care about the insult. She only cared about the optics. She snatched the beautifully wrapped rattle from my hands and tossed it onto a side table like it was worthless. She pulled me into a small alcove, shielding our argument from the main crowd, but making sure Patricia could still see me being subjugated. "You have always been jealous of your sister," my mother spat, her grip bruising my forearm. "You couldn't stand that she got the fairy tale while you ended up a statistic. Do you think these people don't know what you are? You're a stain on this perfect day." Emma is carrying a child of privilege, a child who will inherit wealth and respect. Your presence here is a reminder of everything we've tried to overcome. She leaned in close, her breath heavy with expensive champagne. "Since you got pregnant at 20 and dropped out of college, you've brought nothing but shame to this family. You ruined your life and you humiliated me. Now look at Emma. Look at what she's accomplished. She married Daniel. She has a real family, a real house, real status. She's a financial advisor's wife, a woman of substance. The absolute least you can do is shut your mouth, swallow your pride, and not embarrass us today." I looked across the room and saw Emma standing near a tower of cupcakes. She caught my eye, saw her mother scolding me, and simply lifted her glass with a mocking little smile. She reveled in my humiliation. They truly believed I was still the broke, desperate girl from 12 years ago. They had no idea that the crisis management firm I built from the ground up now represented half the people in this very room. I stared into the eyes of the woman who gave birth to me, searching for any trace of maternal warmth. There was only a desperate, clawing need to be accepted by the very people mocking us. I thought about the multi-million-dollar contract on my desk, the trust fund I had already fully funded for Leo, and the undeniable fact that I could buy and sell everyone in this room 3 times over. But revealing my wealth now wouldn't be enough. They needed to fall from the pedestals they had built on my back. My mother gave my arm one final vicious shake. "Thank her," Beatrice demanded, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Thank Patricia for the clothes. Apologize for your attitude and go sit quietly in the back. Don't speak to anyone. Don't touch the catered food. Just stay out of sight. You will show some respect to the family that elevated your sister, or I swear I will make you regret walking through those doors." The room seemed to hold its breath, guests openly watching. I looked at the bag of trash in my hand, at my mother's furious, desperate face, and then down at my son. Leo didn't look afraid. He looked composed, possessing a cold, calculating awareness that mirrored my own. He was watching Daniel schmooze with investors across the room, and I knew exactly what he was about to do. The room's soft chatter was cut short as Emma stepped onto the center of the imported Persian rug, tapping a silver spoon against her crystal champagne flute. The string quartet fell silent. Dozens of eyes shifted toward her. Glowing in a custom silk maternity gown, she rested one hand on her perfectly round belly and draped the other through Daniel's arm. Daniel flashed his practiced, brilliant smile. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a wealthy, successful white financial advisor who had graciously elevated a black woman into his elite world. "Thank you all for coming today," Emma began, her voice projecting clearly. Looking around this room, seeing Daniel's wonderful family and all our esteemed friends, my heart is just overflowing. Family is everything to us. It's the absolute foundation of a good, respectable life. My mother Beatrice stood near the front, gazing at Emma with an expression of pure worship, nodding emphatically and seeking eye contact with Patricia and the other affluent guests. She had spent her life chasing the validation of people who looked down on her, and Emma was her ultimate trophy. Emma's eyes wandered over the crowd before they locked squarely onto me, her smile sharpening into a weapon. "We want to raise our child with the right values," she continued, her voice dripping with a sugary sweetness that made my skin crawl. "We want to give this baby a legacy of stability, wealth, and most importantly, respectability. I'm so proud to bring a child into this world the right way. I'm proud to give my baby a real family with a father who is actually present, a last name that carries weight in this society." A murmur of polite, uncomfortable agreement rippled through the room. But Emma wasn't finished. She took a step forward, ensuring every guest followed her line of sight right to where I stood. "Because we all know what happens when you make reckless choices," she said, her tone shifting into a theatrical whisper of false pity. "We all know the heavy burden of carrying a child without a father to claim it. I look at my older sister Maya, and I just feel so incredibly grateful that my baby will never have to know that kind of deep shame. My baby will never have to be a burden on the welfare system or a massive disappointment to our parents. At least my baby will actually have a father." The room suddenly felt extremely small. Guests exchanged wide-eyed, shocked glances. They didn't speak up. They just watched the spectacle, silently judging the black single mother who had supposedly ruined her life. My mother didn't try to protect me. Instead, she seized the opportunity to align herself with Patricia's circle. "Amen to that," Beatrice announced loudly, stepping up beside Emma. She turned to the crowd, her voice trembling with manufactured righteousness. Raising Emma was a joy because she always knew her worth. I pray every day that her beautiful child never has to bear the stain her sister brought into our home. She pointed an accusing finger at me. Having a child out of wedlock at 20, dropping out of college, ruining her future. It's been a nightmare for this family's reputation. Maya has been a dark cloud hanging over our heads for 12 long years. She is a complete failure. But Emma, my sweet Emma, you have washed that terrible stain away by marrying into such a prestigious, wonderful family." Beatrice beamed at Patricia, practically begging for a crumb of validation. Patricia simply gave a tight, condescending nod, clearly enjoying the show. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. In my line of work, I've faced down ruthless billionaires, aggressive prosecutors, and relentless media mobs. A petty, insecure sister and a delusional, validation-seeking mother didn't even make my heart rate spike. They saw a helpless college dropout, unaware that my firm now controlled the public narratives of half the people in this room. I simply reached for a glass of sparkling water from a passing server's tray and took a slow, deliberate sip, letting their toxic words hang in the air. Beside me, my 12-year-old son Leo adjusted his suit jacket. He had spent his life watching me dismantle arrogant people with cold, hard facts. He inherited my analytical mind and my absolute refusal to be intimidated. Leo stepped forward, right into the center of the open floor. He looked straight at Emma, his expression remarkably serene. "Aunt Emma," he said, his voice clear and ringing through the dead-silent room. Emma blinked, thrown off. "Yes, Leo?" she asked, her tone patronizing. "Do you have something to apologize for on your mother's behalf?" Leo tilted his head, his eyes slowly shifting to lock onto Daniel. "No, Aunt Emma. I just have a question about this perfect family you're talking about." Daniel's camera-ready smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable, under the piercing gaze of a 12-year-old boy. "Should I tell everyone here about Uncle Daniel's other family?" Leo asked casually, as if inquiring about the catering. "Should I tell them about the wife named Sarah and the little boy named Toby living in Seattle?" The temperature in the room dropped below freezing. The silence was absolute, pressing against your eardrums. No one breathed. Emma's smug smile melted, replaced by blank confusion. "Daniel, what is he talking about?" she whispered. Patricia, standing near the dessert table, turned deathly pale. The crystal wine glass slipped from her suddenly weak grip, plummeting downward and hitting the white marble floor with a resounding crash. Dark red wine splattered everywhere, looking exactly like blood spreading across the pristine stone. The shattering glass broke the spell. The room erupted into a chorus of gasps and frantic whispers. "Uncle Daniel told you he goes on business trips to the West Coast every other week, right?" Leo continued smoothly, his voice slicing through the rising panic. "He doesn't go to business meetings. He goes to a house in Seattle. I saw the property records and the flight manifests on my mother's desk. Sarah and Toby think he's on business trips here in Atlanta. You think he's on business trips there. I guess building a legacy is really hard work when you have to do it twice." Daniel's face turned a violent mottled shade of purple. The polished facade disintegrated in real time. The veins in his neck bulged. With a guttural roar of pure rage, he dropped Emma's hand and charged directly across the floor, launching himself straight toward my son. He covered the distance in 3 massive strides, his heavy Italian leather shoes pounding against the marble. His hands reached out, fingers curving into hooks, aiming for the collar of Leo's crisp white shirt. Leo didn't flinch. He stood his ground. But a mother's protective instinct is faster than any man's blind rage. Adrenaline exploded through my veins. Time seemed to slow down. I didn't scream. My hand shot out to the catered dessert table beside me, my fingers wrapped around the edge of a delicate gold-rimmed porcelain plate. In one fluid, lightning-fast motion, I smashed the plate violently against the sharp edge of the granite countertop. The sickening crack echoed through the room like a gunshot. Before Daniel's thick fingers could graze my son's shirt, I stepped directly into his path. I thrust my arm upward, pressing the jagged, razor-sharp edge of the broken porcelain firmly against the pulsing blue vein on the inside of his wrist. The sudden, violent shift in power froze him instantly. He could feel the sharp ceramic biting into his skin. One twitch of my wrist, and it would slice straight through. My voice dropped an octave low, utterly calm, and absolutely lethal. I looked directly into his wild, panicked eyes. "If you breathe on my son," I whispered, "you will bleed out on this imported rug before an ambulance even reaches your security gate. Step back." Daniel swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. The murderous rage in his eyes was instantly replaced by raw, trembling fear. He slowly lowered his hands, taking a clumsy, stumbling step backward. The entire room remained paralyzed, frozen like statues. Then the silence was broken by a loud theatrical wail. Emma sank onto a plush velvet ottoman, sobbing hysterically, playing the ultimate victim. This was the moment any normal mother would turn to her son-in-law and demand the truth. But Beatrice is not a normal mother. Her entire existence is built on the validation of the wealthy people in this room. The threat of Daniel's secret family destroying her proximity to power was too much for her fragile ego. So she chose absolute denial. She chose to sacrifice me. Beatrice marched aggressively across the room. Her face was twisted with a frantic, desperate fury. She stopped right in front of me. She didn't look at Daniel. She didn't check on Leo. She raised her right hand and slapped me across the face with every ounce of strength she possessed. The sharp, violent sound bounced off the high ceilings. My head snapped to the side. A hot, stinging pain radiated across my left cheek. I slowly turned my face back to look at her. I didn't raise my hand to touch my cheek. I didn't shed a single tear. I just stared at the woman who gave birth to me as she completely lost her mind to protect a pathological liar. "You bitter, jealous wretch!" Beatrice screamed, saliva flying from her lips. "How dare you bring your bastard child into this house and coach him to spread malicious, filthy lies about a good man? You are sick. You are a sick, twisted woman who cannot stand to see her own sister happy." She turned to the stunned guests, her hands raised in a desperate plea. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking with manufactured grief. "Don't listen to a single word this miserable failure says. She has been jealous of Emma since they were little girls. She ruined her own life. She's just trying to destroy this marriage because no respectable man would ever want her." She turned back to me, her eyes filled with genuine burning hatred. I saw exactly who she was. She was not a mother. She was a parasite. "You are a stain on this family," Beatrice hissed, stepping closer. "You've been a dark cloud over my life for 12 years. I have tried to love you, but you are rotten to the core. I am done. Do you hear me? I am completely done. You are no longer my daughter. I disown you right here, right now. I never want to see your face again. You are dead to me. Now take your lying, disrespectful child and get out of my perfect daughter's home before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." She stood there panting, expecting me to break down and beg for her forgiveness. Instead, I simply opened my fingers. The jagged porcelain shard dropped from my hand, shattering on the marble floor. I turned my back on her, dismissing her completely. I looked down at Leo. My brave, brilliant son was watching his grandmother with an expression of pure, unadulterated pity. I offered him my hand and he took it firmly. We turned to leave, walking with our heads held high. As we reached the entryway, Patricia intercepted us, shaking with quiet, suppressed rage. She leaned in close, the sour stench of spilled wine and stale mints rolling off her breath. She spoke in a low, venomous hiss. "You think you can just walk in here and drop a bomb on my family? You think you can slander my son and walk away? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have the best corporate lawyers in the state on retainer. I will unleash an army of attorneys on you by tomorrow morning. I'm going to sue you for defamation, for slander, for emotional distress. I will bury you in endless litigation. I will drain whatever pathetic little savings account you've managed to scrape together. I will make sure you are bankrupt, homeless, and begging on the street. I will destroy your entire life." She stood tall, puffed out with arrogant certainty, fully expecting me to cower in fear. I stopped walking. I stood perfectly still. I slowly turned my head and looked Patricia directly in the eyes. I let the tense silence stretch for 5 long seconds. Then I smiled. It wasn't a polite smile. It was a slow, terrifyingly confident smile that reached my eyes and shone with absolute authority. It was the smile of a predator looking at prey that had willingly walked right into a carefully laid trap. Patricia physically recoiled, clearly rattled by my total lack of fear. I didn't say a word. I just kept that chilling, knowing smile fixed on my face, reached out, grasped the polished brass doorknob, and pulled the heavy door open. With my son's hand securely in mine, I stepped out of the mansion, leaving them all trapped inside the prison of their own impending destruction. The drive home was silent, but it was a comfortable, victorious kind of silence. I slept incredibly well that night, the kind of deep, restorative sleep that only comes when you finally stop pretending to respect people who despise you. The next morning at exactly 8 a.m., my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a man in a cheap, poorly fitting gray suit, holding a thick manila envelope. He took one look at me in my simple morning robe, assumed I was the struggling, desperate single mother his clients had described, and shoved the heavy envelope aggressively into my chest. "You've been served," he sneered, before marching back to his battered sedan. I closed the door, walked back to the kitchen, and slid the stack of documents out. It was a massive lawsuit filed by a notoriously aggressive law firm. Daniel was suing me for $2 million. The legal complaint was a masterpiece of fiction, accusing me of premeditated defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and catastrophic interference with his professional reputation. It claimed I was a deeply unstable, jealous relative who had maliciously coached a minor child to spout fabricated lies. But the most revealing part was the list of demands. Attached to the back was a legally binding script. His attorneys demanded that I record a high-definition video of myself reading this exact script, post it across all my social media, and send it to every guest who had attended the shower. The script required me to state that I was a bitter, resentful woman who fabricated the story about Sarah in Seattle, that I manipulated my son out of pure spite. The final paragraph required me to beg Daniel, Emma, and Patricia for their gracious forgiveness. They wanted me on my knees. It was a classic amateur crisis management strategy: intimidate the whistleblowers so severely that they recant their statement. I took a slow sip of my coffee and let out a soft, genuine chuckle. If I were a struggling waitress, a $2 million lawsuit would have sent me into a full-blown panic attack. But I am not a struggling office worker. I am the founder and CEO of Apex Crisis Management. I eat aggressive litigation for breakfast. By filing this lawsuit, Daniel had made the most fatal miscalculation of his life. In a defamation suit, truth is the absolute defense. He had just legally opened the door for my attorneys to subpoena every single one of his bank records, travel logs, and hidden assets. He had just handed me the keys to his own destruction. Right on cue, my cell phone vibrated. The caller ID flashed with my mother's name, Beatrice. I let it ring 3 times before I finally answered. I didn't even get a chance to say hello. "Did you get them?" She screamed into the receiver, her voice shrill and hysterical. "Did you get the papers, Maya?" "I did," I replied, my voice level. 2 million is a very specific number. I suppose Daniel needs a lot of cash to maintain 2 separate households. "Don't you dare play your little mind games with me," she shrieked. "You have crossed the line for the last time. Patricia called me at dawn. Her lawyers are going to take everything you own. Emma has been crying all night. Her blood pressure is through the roof. You are putting her unborn baby at risk with your vicious, disgusting jealousy." She paused, gasping for breath. "I should have known you would end up trying to destroy us." Beatrice spat venom dripping from every syllable. "I saw the rot inside of you 12 years ago. When you came crying to my door 20 years old, knocked up and pathetic, I did exactly what I had to do. I did the right thing." The kitchen went still as she weaponized the darkest moment of my life. "I threw you out into the pouring rain where you belonged." She continued, her voice gaining a cruel, triumphant edge. "I handed you a crisp $200 bill, and I told you to disappear. I told you that you were a heavy burden then, and you are a massive, suffocating burden now. 12 years ago, those words had broken me. Standing on her porch in the freezing rain, pregnant and terrified, that $200 bill felt like a death sentence. But the scared girl who cried on that porch was long dead. The woman standing in this kitchen was forged in fire and absolute autonomy. "Are you listening to me, Maya?" Beatrice barked, mistaking my silence for submission. "You are going to sign that apology today. You are going to record that video exactly as Daniel's lawyers wrote it, and you are going to beg them to drop this lawsuit. If you don't, Patricia and I will make sure you lose everything. We will call Child Protective Services. We will tell them you are an unfit, unstable mother. We will make sure you lose custody of that lying, disrespectful brat you call a son." The air in my lungs stopped moving. The faint amusement I felt vanished, replaced by a cold, absolute void. Beatrice had crossed the one line that could never be uncrossed. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached forward and pressed the red button on the screen, cutting her off mid-threat. I did not feel fear. I did not feel panic. I felt the singular, terrifying focus of a woman who was about to systematically dismantle an entire bloodline. I walked into my private home office, a command center with 3 massive monitors and secure servers. I picked up the encrypted landline that connected directly to my firm's executive suite and dialed a 4-digit extension. My private secretary answered on the first ring. "Good morning, Maya," she said, her voice crisp. "Cancel all my non-essential meetings for the next 72 hours, I commanded. "Activate Operation Spiderweb. It's time to move. Contact our legal department and have them file the countersuit against Daniel immediately. And get Seattle on the line. Tell his first wife to get ready to go live. The heavy click of the front door unlocking echoed through my quiet kitchen. My mother Beatrice stood in the entryway clutching the spare key I had foolishly given her for emergencies. Right behind her walked Emma, and bringing up the rear was Daniel, his face a mask of unearned arrogance. He wore a sharp, custom-tailored navy suit, surveying my living room with a look of profound pity meant to degrade and diminish. They marched into my kitchen like an invading army. I remained perfectly still by the kitchen island, a fresh cup of coffee in my hand. Daniel took the lead, stepping right up to my island to intimidate me with his size. He slammed a thick stack of legal documents onto the granite countertop. "There it is, Maya," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "A formal apology and a complete retraction. My lawyers drafted it this morning. It's non-negotiable. All you have to do is record the video apology and post it online. You do that, and we'll consider this unfortunate little tantrum over." I didn't reach for a pen. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Daniel leaned closer, flashing that practiced smile. "Look, I'm a reasonable man. He continued with a sickening display of false generosity. I know things are tight for you. Emma tells me you can barely afford the rent in this neighborhood, so I'm willing to be gracious. If you sign this right now, I'll write you a personal check for $5,000. He paused, letting the number hang in the air. $5,000, Maya. That's a lot of money for someone in your desperate position. You can use it to buy Leo some decent clothes or pay off whatever crushing credit card debt is keeping you awake at night. Just sign the paper, Maya. Take the handout and fade back into the background where you belong. Before I could process the audacity of his pathetic bribe, Emma stepped forward. She looked around my kitchen, her upper lip curling in theatrical disgust. God, it's so incredibly depressing in here, she sighed. It's so small, Maya. I honestly don't know how you wake up in this tiny, pathetic little box and not feel like a complete and utter failure. She deliberately lifted her left hand, letting the massive 2-carat diamond on her finger flash in the morning light. Look at my life, Maya, she sneered. Look at what I have. I have a husband who adores me, a massive estate, a closet full of clothes that cost more than your entire annual salary. I have the respect and admiration of the community. I'm a wife, a mother, a woman of immense substance. And what do you have, a mouthy kid and a rented box? You are nothing. You have always been nothing. Beatrice stepped forward, nodding enthusiastically. You are going to sign that paper right now, Maya, she demanded, pointing a shaking finger at the documents. I kept this spare key because I knew deep down you'd eventually need me to step in and manage your chaotic, pathetic life. Well, I'm stepping in. Pick up the pen sign, the apology take, Daniel's generous money, and get down on your knees and thank God this man is willing to show you such immense mercy. She leaned heavily over the counter, her face inches from mine. Sign it, she hissed. Sign it before I remind you what happens when you cross me. I threw you out into the street once with nothing but $200. I'll do it again. The air was electric. My face was a mask of terrifying calm. I set my coffee mug down. The sharp clink of ceramic on stone was the only sound. I walked slowly around the kitchen island. Daniel puffed out his chest, expecting me to reach for the pen. Emma folded her arms, a triumphant smirk on her face. Beatrice sighed in relief, believing she had bullied me into submission. I walked right past them, straight to the heavy wooden front door. I reached out and twisted the deadbolt. A loud, resounding crack echoed through the entryway. Then I reached for the spare key Beatrice had left in the keyhole. I pulled it out, walked slowly back to the kitchen, and held it over the stainless steel trash can. I let go. The key hit the bottom of the empty metal bin with a loud, final rattle. Daniel frowned, his smug expression faltering. Emma uncrossed her arms, suddenly nervous. Beatrice took a hesitant step back. What are you doing, Maya? Daniel asked, his voice losing its confident edge. Why did you lock the door? I ignored him. I walked to a hidden compartment in my kitchen cabinetry and pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner. The panel slid open with a soft hum. I reached inside and pulled out a thick, dark red folder, the exact shade of drying blood. I walked back to the kitchen island and placed it deliberately next to Daniel's pathetic lawsuit. I looked at Daniel. The terror was beginning to bloom in his eyes. He recognized the embossed seal on the front of the red folder. It was the seal of a prestigious Seattle law firm, the firm representing Sarah. Before I sign anything, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a freshly sharpened blade. Before I sign a single page of your ridiculous amateur hour lawsuit, you might want to look at what's inside this red folder. I tapped my manicured fingernail twice against the heavy cardboard cover. Before I sign, I repeated, ensuring every word landed with devastating impact. You should really check to see if your other wife's signature on this absolute power of attorney is actually real, Daniel. Daniel's cell phone vibrated against the countertop with the frantic urgency of a fire alarm. He stared at the glowing screen. The caller ID displayed the name of his chief corporate accountant. His hands trembled so severely he fumbled twice before finally answering. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin the pale, sickly shade of wet ash. I didn't need to hear the voice on the other end to know what was being said. I orchestrated it. I watched his mouth fall open. He stammered, asking what the accountant meant by frozen assets, why federal investigators were in the lobby of his firm, how Sarah could possibly initiate a complete asset lockdown. The phone slipped from his loose grip, hitting the counter with a loud crack, the screen splintering. Daniel's knees buckled. The arrogant patriarch who had threatened my son completely collapsed onto a bar stool, his head dropping into his shaking hands. He was ruined. I didn't give them a second to breathe. I flipped open the red folder, pulled out the first stack of legally certified documents, and tossed them on the counter. I slid the first paper toward Emma. She stared at it, her eyes wide. That is a certified copy of Daniel's active marriage license to Sarah. I stated, my voice ringing with clinical precision. There is no divorce decree, Emma. You are not a wife. You are a mistress. Your entire marriage is a legal fiction. You are an accessory to bigamy. Emma gasped, stumbling backward against the refrigerator, shaking her head wildly. She looked at Daniel, begging him to deny it. He didn't look up, just let out a low, guttural moan of agonizing defeat. I slid the next stack of papers across the granite. These are certified bank transfers. I continued, tapping the highlighted columns. Daniel didn't build a firm here. He built a hollow shell company. Every dollar he has spent was systematically embezzled from Sarah's generational family trust fund. He forged her signature and drained her accounts. The massive estate you live in was bought with stolen money. The luxury cars in your driveway are leased with stolen money. I paused, my eyes dropping to the massive diamond on Emma's trembling hand. Even that spectacular 2-carat rock you were just waving in my face, Emma. He bought it using a credit card registered to Sarah's maiden name. You don't own a single thing. By tomorrow morning, the federal authorities will be seizing every last asset. You are going to be homeless. You have absolutely nothing. The temperature in this room dropped to freezing. Daniel was hyperventilating, a full-blown panic attack taking hold. He wasn't just broke, he was facing decades in federal prison for wire fraud forgery and grand larceny. I turned my attention to Beatrice. I expected her to scream to faint, to rush to Emma's side, but she didn't. The horrifying realization that her proximity to wealth and power had just vanished hit her. She didn't care about Emma's broken heart. She only cared about the impending public humiliation. She turned slowly to face Emma, her expression twisted into a mask of pure revulsion. She took 2 quick steps toward her youngest daughter and, without warning, delivered a vicious, resounding slap across Emma's cheek. "You stupid, incompetent little girl," Beatrice snarled. "You had one job: to secure a wealthy man and keep him satisfied. You let him keep a whole other family. You are a pathetic embarrassment. You have ruined everything I built for us." Emma sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. But Beatrice wasn't finished. She was a survivalist. She turned away from her weeping daughter and locked her desperate, calculating eyes on me. She processed the reality the daughter she called a failure was the CEO of Apex Crisis Management, the one pulling the strings. Beatrice dropped heavily to her knees on my kitchen floor. She crawled forward, grabbing my hands with a desperate, clawing grip. "You're the CEO," she whispered, her voice frantic. "You control the media. You bury scandals. You can fix this, Maya. You have to fix this. Activate your firm. Destroy Sarah's credibility. Bury this story. Save our reputation, Maya. Do your job and save this family." Her perfectly painted nails dug fiercely into the fabric of my trousers, her knuckles bone white. She was kneeling on the floor of the very house she had just called a cheap, pathetic box. "Look at me, Maya," she pleaded. "We are your family. You owe us your protection." I stared down at the woman who gave birth to me. There was no warmth in her eyes, no regret. There was only a rabid, self-serving terror. "Do your job," Beatrice demanded, shaking my legs. "You have to save Emma. She's pregnant." She tilted her head up, her eyes wild. "Emma cannot be a single mother," she insisted. "She's not like you, Maya. She's fragile. She was born to be a society wife. She can't endure the shame. You know how to survive in the mud. You're used to suffering. You're tough. But Emma would break. A scandal like this would literally destroy her." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of her logic hung heavily in the quiet kitchen. Emma looked up at me from the floor, her eyes echoing our mother's pathetic plea. "You can handle the disgrace," Beatrice continued. "It's already your brand. So you take the fall for this. You make the evidence vanish. You cover for Daniel so he can quietly negotiate a settlement with Sarah, and they can get married legally. You have to do this for your sister." The last invisible string that tied me to this toxic family snapped. I reached down, grasped my mother's wrists with an iron grip, and forcefully yanked her hands off my body. Beatrice gasped, stumbling backward on her knees. I stepped back, creating a definitive boundary. "You are asking me to commit a federal crime to subsidize a con artist." I stated, my voice sharp and precise. "You are asking me to destroy evidence in an active federal investigation because you believe my sister is too delicate to face the consequences of her own extraordinary arrogance." "You are her sister," she shrieked. "It is your duty to protect her." "Duty," I repeated, tasting the bitter irony. "Let's talk about duty, Beatrice. Let's talk about what a mother owes her child. 12 years ago, I stood on your immaculate front porch. I was terrified, pregnant, and begging for help. Do you remember what you said to me?" Beatrice's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Because I remember every single syllable, I continued, stepping closer. "You told me I was a humiliating, tragic charity case. You told me I had made my bed and now I had to lie in the dirt. You looked at my swelling stomach and told me my child was a permanent stain on your respectable life. You said I was a foolish, ungrateful wretch who deserved every ounce of suffering coming my way. And then you handed me $200 and told me to get off your property before the neighbors saw me. I paused, letting the memories amplify. You told me I was born for the mud." I said, my voice steady and razor-sharp. "You were right. I learned how to survive in the mud. I learned how to fight. I built an empire from absolutely nothing while you curated a pathetic hollow illusion. I became a kingmaker. I control the narratives of the most powerful people on the continent. I built a fortress of absolute security for my son. And I did it all without a single drop of your conditional toxic love." "Maya, please," she begged, tears of pure panic finally spilling down her cheeks. "You cannot do this." "I can and I will," I replied effortlessly. "You came into my home. You insulted my life. You tried to bribe me with stolen money. You threatened to call Child Protective Services on my son. You crossed the absolute point of no return. I am not your savior, Beatrice. I am your reckoning." I turned my back on her, the dismissal absolute. I walked to the console table beneath my living room's large flat-screen television and picked up the remote. "You think you can bully me into silence?" I said, my back still to them. "You think you can sweep Daniel's fraud under the rug to protect your country club memberships? You fail to understand the fundamental rule of crisis management." I turned around, holding the remote. "You never, ever antagonize the person who holds the detonator." I pressed the power button. The screen flashed to life in brilliant high definition, the volume filling the room with the crisp, urgent voice of the local news anchor. A blazing red breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom. The anchor looked gravely serious. "Breaking news this hour out of downtown Atlanta," he announced. "Federal authorities have just raided the executive offices of prominent wealth management firm Vanguard Financial." The screen cut to live helicopter footage of heavily armed federal agents swarming the high-rise building where Daniel's office was located. "We are receiving unconfirmed reports that the firm's CEO, Daniel Sterling, is currently facing a massive multi-agency investigation regarding severe allegations of wire fraud, grand larceny, and corporate embezzlement. Sources inside the Justice Department indicate an emergency arrest warrant has been issued, and authorities are currently moving to secure his private residence." I lowered the remote. The flashing lights from the television reflected in my eyes as I looked back at the three people standing in my kitchen. The illusion was dead. The perfect facade was burned to the ground. The reality of their absolute destruction had finally arrived. "Checkmate," I whispered. Daniel snapped. The undeniable reality broke through his catatonic shock. With a sound that was half terrified sob, half animalistic whine, he shoved himself off the bar stool with such violent force that it crashed backward onto the floor. He didn't look at Emma. He didn't spare a glance for the woman carrying his unborn child. He scrambled past the kitchen island, his expensive shoes slipping frantically on the polished floor. He ran. The heavy oak front door banged open. He sprinted down the driveway, driven entirely by pure cowardice. We listened to the sharp screech of tires tearing against the asphalt as he fled, leaving the two women he deceived to face the wreckage. Emma watched the open doorway, her mouth hanging open. The reality of his abandonment hit her full force, and she collapsed into a crumpled heap on the floor, weeping with loud, ugly, theatrical sobs. Before Beatrice could process Daniel's flight, a sharp, piercing ringtone cut through the sound of Emma's crying. Beatrice flinched, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. The caller ID flashed Patricia. A desperate spark of hope lit Beatrice's eyes. She truly believed Patricia was calling with an army of elite lawyers to save the day. "Patricia, thank God," Beatrice gasped, pressing the phone to her ear. "You have to do something. You have to send your attorneys. Maya is out of control." But instead of reassurance, a shrill, hysterical scream erupted from the phone's speaker so loud I could hear every word. "Are you watching the news?" Patricia shrieked, her voice devoid of its usual country club superiority. "They're here, Beatrice. The federal agents are inside my house. They kicked down my door. They're tearing apart my home office, seizing my computers, my banking records. They're freezing every single account." Beatrice went perfectly still. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "You have nothing to do with Daniel's business." "I'm not shielded," Patricia wailed, the sound of heavy boots and shouting agents audible in the background. "Daniel routed the stolen money through my offshore accounts. He used my signature to set up the dummy corporations. The FBI is holding a federal warrant for my arrest right in front of my face. They're charging me with complicity, Beatrice International Money Laundering Federal Conspiracy. They're seizing my estate. They're taking everything. I am ruined. We are completely, entirely ruined." The line went dead. Beatrice stood paralyzed. The phone slipped from her limp fingers. The money was gone. The status was gone. The entire glamorous empire was a house of cards built on stolen funds, and the federal government had just blown it all to pieces. But the true horrifying depth of their toxicity was revealed in the very next moment. Emma suddenly stopped crying. She wiped the smeared mascara from her cheeks and slowly pushed herself up from the floor. She didn't look toward the open door where the father of her child had just fled. She didn't express a single ounce of concern for the man she claimed to love. Emma looked directly at me, her eyes cold and filled with a deeply disturbing sense of entitlement. The golden child syndrome ran so deep, she couldn't comprehend a reality where she wasn't catered to. "So, you're actually a multimillionaire," she said, her voice eerily calm, as she brushed invisible dust off her silk dress. "You have all this money hiding in the bank, while I'm about to lose my entire life." She walked toward me, her chin lifting with sickening arrogance, clinging to her Hermes handbag as if it constituted her identity. "You heard what Mom said," Emma demanded. "Daniel's accounts are frozen. The feds are taking everything. That means I have no way to pay the mortgage, the staff, the country club fees. I am not going to be humiliated. I am not going to be kicked out of the best neighborhood in the state because my husband made a stupid financial mistake." She crossed her arms, glaring at me. "You are my sister," she dictated. "You have the money now. You are going to write me a check today. You are going to cover the mortgage and keep my credit cards active. You're used to struggling, Maya. You know how to live like a peasant. I don't. I was built to be a society wife. You owe me this financial support. You have to maintain my lifestyle. I will not accept anything less." I stood perfectly still and stared at my sister. The sheer, breathtaking magnitude of her delusion was almost difficult to process. I slowly raised my right hand and pointed my index finger directly toward the open front door. "Get out," I said. The command was quiet, but it carried the crushing weight of absolute authority. Emma scoffed loudly. "Stop being dramatic, Maya. I need a massive check to cover the mansion. I'm not leaving until you transfer the funds." "You already lost it, Emma," I stated, my voice dropping into a deadly clinical register. You don't seem to understand how federal asset forfeiture works. You don't own that mansion. You never did. Daniel bought it using stolen funds. The federal authorities filed a non-negotiable lien against the property at 8 a.m. this morning. The bank issued the formal foreclosure notice 2 hours later. That luxurious estate is now officially government property. I pointed to the door again, my eyes burning with cold, unyielding finality. You don't have a mortgage to pay. You have a federal eviction to survive. The authorities are giving you exactly 30 days to pack up your stolen designer clothes, grab your pathetic, overpriced handbag, and get out on the street. You have absolutely nothing. You are absolutely nothing. Now take our mother, walk out of my home, and never show your faces here again. 30 days passed. 30 days since the grand illusion shattered. I sit behind the massive obsidian desk in my corner office at Apex Crisis Management, a sanctuary of quiet power. The fallout was swift and brutal. Daniel was apprehended at the airport with a forged passport and denied bail. He traded his custom suits for an orange jumpsuit and is now staring down a 20-year sentence. Patricia's downfall was even more spectacular. The government seized her entire estate, her vehicles, her art. Her high-paid lawyers vanished. The woman who ruled her country club with an iron fist was relocated to a crowded state-funded public nursing home, a total pariah. As for Beatrice and Emma, I watched from afar. A normal mother would have accepted reality, found a modest apartment, and prepared to raise a child without luxury. But they were incapable of that. Their identities were tied to the perception of wealth. To be seen moving out in disgrace was a fate worse than death. Emma refused to pack, spending weeks sobbing on the floor of her stolen mansion. Beatrice, driven by her pathological need to maintain status, went manic. The 30-day eviction notice ticked down, and she made the most desperate, financially suicidal decision of her life. She quietly sold her own house for a low cash offer. She liquidated her entire retirement portfolio, drained every savings account, and cashed in every bond. She threw away her own future, all to protect a meaningless facade. Her plan was to use all her liquidated assets to pay for Emma to stay in that exact mansion, to pretend the raid never happened. But she had a problem. The government had seized the mansion and transferred it to the bank for a rapid auction. She didn't have enough cash to buy it outright. Then a miracle occurred. A private, anonymous investor swooped in and purchased the mansion in an all-cash deal, then listed it for lease. Beatrice pounced on it. She begged the leasing agent for a meeting, offering to pay an exorbitant rent, a massive security deposit, and the first entire year upfront in cash. She poured the last drop of her life savings into this single desperate transaction. My phone chimes on my desk, a text from Beatrice. It's the first contact since I kicked her out. I read the message. The sheer blinding arrogance is almost poetic. We are doing perfectly fine without you. It begins. This family doesn't need a vindictive child like you. You thought you could destroy your sister, but you severely underestimated me. I protect my own. I found a private, anonymous investor. He bought Emma's mansion back and agreed to lease it to us long term. I read the next line, a slow, deep smile spreading across my face. I paid the lease in full, she wrote. Emma will never have to live in a slum. She will raise her baby in the luxury she is accustomed to. She will never be a pathetic charity case like you. We won Maya. You failed to break us. Don't ever contact us again. I read it one more time. I feel a profound, exhilarating sense of closure. They are so blinded by their own vanity, they never stop to question their sudden strokes of good luck. Never wonder who this mysterious, benevolent investor could be. I set the phone down. My executive assistant Chloe steps into the room holding a leather-bound portfolio. She knows exactly what has been going on, how much capital I authorized the firm's private real estate acquisition shell company to spend at the bank auction last week. Boss, Chloe says, her voice clear and steady. The new tenants have arrived. They're asking to meet the property owner to sign the lease and hand over the cashier's check. I slowly stand, smoothing the wrinkles in my suit. I pick up my favorite silver pen, bring them into conference room A. I reply, my voice perfectly calm. Let's go welcome my mother and my sister to my property. I walk toward the door. The trap is set. The bait has been swallowed. They have brought me every last cent they own, unaware they are handing their entire financial existence to the daughter they threw away. It's time to sign the papers. It's time for them to look their landlord in the eye. And it's time for them to realize they have exactly 30 days to pack their bags and get out of my house. We follow Beatrice and Emma from behind as they march toward the towering glass and steel structure of the city's most exclusive commercial high-rise. They walk as if they still own the city, draped in the final remnants of their fraudulent wealth. They stride through the revolving glass doors of the lobby with the blistering entitlement of royalty. Inside the elevator, Beatrice speaks in hushed, excited tones about the private investor they are about to meet, a wealthy, elderly white male billionaire. She has fabricated in her mind a patriarchal savior who took pity on a beautiful, disgraced society wife. The elevator bell chimes and the doors slide open to the 40th floor. The executive brokerage level is breathtakingly opulent, seamless black marble floors, expensive modern art, and a panoramic view of the entire Atlanta skyline. It is a fortress of absolute corporate power. They approach the massive brushed steel reception desk where Chloe sits, her expression a mask of unyielding professionalism. "We're here for the private signing," Emma announces, her voice loud and demanding. "We have an exclusive appointment with the managing director regarding the Sterling estate in Buckhead. Announce us immediately." Chloe offers a polite, terrifyingly empty corporate smile. "May I have the name? The appointment was booked under, please." Beatrice snaps. "The appointment is under my name and we don't have time to wait in the lobby." Chloe types a few keystrokes. "I see the appointment," she replies smoothly. "The chief executive officer is finishing a conference call. If you would please take a seat." Emma loses her temper. "You clearly don't understand who we are," she snarls, slapping a certified bank document onto the desk. "Do you know what this is? This is a cashier's check for exactly $100,000. This is a full year of rent paid up front. Your boss bought our mansion to lease it back to us. We are VIP clients. I am not sitting on a waiting room sofa like a peasant. You tell your boss his money has arrived, and we demand to be seen right now." Chloe looks down at the check that represents the absolute final drop of Beatrice's liquidated life, then back up at the two desperate women. The empty smile returns. "I completely understand," she says, her voice smooth as glass. $100,000 is certainly a significant transaction. Please follow me. The chief executive officer has been expecting you. They exchange a triumphant, smug look, believing they have bullied the system into submission. Chloe leads them down a wide, silent corridor lined with dark, polished wood. The acoustic dampening absorbs the sound of their footsteps, creating an eerie, pressurized atmosphere. At the very end stands a set of massive, towering double doors made of solid dark oak. Chloe stops. "Right this way," she says softly, and pushes the heavy doors wide open. Beatrice and Emma step over the threshold. The office is vast and intimidating. A massive geometric obsidian desk dominates the room. Behind it, an enormous ribbed leather armchair is turned away from them, facing the panoramic windows. "Good afternoon," Beatrice calls out, her tone dripping with manufactured warmth. "I can't thank you enough for making time to see us. We have the certified funds right here." The room remains silent for 2 agonizing seconds. Then the massive leather armchair slowly, deliberately begins to swivel around. The back of the chair turns, revealing the figure sitting behind the obsidian desk. I am sitting there. My posture is relaxed, my hands steepled beneath my chin. I am wearing a razor-sharp, tailored charcoal suit. My eyes lock directly onto my mother and my sister, capturing the exact, devastating millisecond their brains attempt to process the impossible reality in front of them. The triumphant smiles on their faces instantly die. The silence is absolute, heavy, and suffocating. "Maya," Beatrice breathes, her voice a hollow, wavering rasp. "What are you doing sitting there? Where is the managing director?" Emma steps forward, her shock morphing into petulant anger. "Get out of that chair, Maya," she snaps. "This is not a joke. We have a highly confidential meeting with the owner. You're going to get yourself fired for playing around in your boss's office." I don't say a word. I simply rest my elbows on the cool stone of the desk and interlock my fingers, resting my chin on my hands. I pick up the heavy sterling silver pen lying next to me and tap the metal tip lightly against the obsidian surface. A single sharp click rings out. "I am the boss, Emma," I state, my voice perfectly level, carrying the cold, undeniable weight of absolute truth. Emma scoffs. "You're a crisis manager. You don't own a private equity firm. Stop wasting our time and go get the investor." I tap the pen a second time. Apex Crisis Management is the parent company. I explain, my tone slow and deliberate, as if speaking to a remarkably slow child. I built it 12 years ago. It generates massive liquid capital. 5 years ago, I diversified. I created a subsidiary corporation to handle high-yield distressed real estate acquisitions. That subsidiary is called Apex Holdings. The color begins to drain from Beatrice's face. She stares at the silver pen as if it's a venomous snake. When the federal government seized Daniel's assets, I continue watching the horrifying realization dawn in my mother's eyes. The bank immediately put your mansion up for a rapid closed-door auction. Apex Holdings was the highest bidder. We purchased the property in a completely anonymous all-cash transaction last week. I pause, letting the crushing reality settle. "I am the managing director," I say softly. "I am the private investor. I am the sole owner of the Buckhead estate." Beatrice stumbles backward, pressing a hand to her chest, gasping for air. The grand, arrogant matriarch has vanished, replaced by a terrified, broken woman. "But the money," she stammers, her voice cracking. "The cashier's check. I just gave your receptionist a cashier's check for $100,000. I liquidated my entire retirement account. I sold my house. I gave her everything I had left." I offer a small, polite nod. "Yes, you did," I reply smoothly. "And I want to personally thank you for that generous deposit." "Beatrice, Chloe processed the transfer the moment you walked down the hallway. That $100,000 cleared immediately. It is currently sitting securely in my corporate accounts." Beatrice lets out a sound of pure agony, a wretched, breathless gasp, the sound of a woman realizing she has just slit her own financial throat. She physically folds inward her knees, shaking violently. "You gave up your entire life." I continue, my voice dropping into a deadly clinical register. "You sold the roof over your own head. You drained the accounts you spent 40 years building. You sacrificed your own security, all to protect an illusion. You were so terrified of the country club women whispering about your disgraced daughter that you willingly threw away your last remaining lifeline. And the beautiful poetic irony of it all is that you brought that money directly to me." I stand up slowly, placing both hands flat on the obsidian desk. "You handed your entire life savings to the daughter you called a disgrace," I state coldly. "You paid $100,000 to the woman you called a pathetic charity case. You financed my firm with the very last dollars to your name." Beatrice covers her face with both hands, sobbing silently. She has absolutely nothing left. But Emma doesn't collapse. Her face contorts into a mask of rabid, unhinged fury. "You manipulative, evil witch," she screams. "You set us up. You stole our money." "I didn't trick anyone, Emma," I reply effortlessly. "I simply listed a property for lease. Beatrice sought out my leasing agent. Beatrice offered the cash up front. It's not my fault neither of you bothered to read the corporate ownership filings." "I want it back," Emma shrieks, stomping her foot like a toddler. "Give us the money back right now. I am not renting a house from you. Where is the lease agreement? Give it to me. I'm going to tear it to shreds." She lunges forward, her hands slamming against my desk, desperately searching for the documents. "Tear up the lease," she demands. I look down at my sister's pathetic desperation. I reach into the top drawer of my desk and pull out a single crisp white sheet of paper. It is not a thick lease agreement. I slide it slowly across the desk until it stops in front of her trembling hands. "That is not a lease agreement, Emma," I say, my voice ringing with total unyielding finality. Emma's eyes frantically scan the bold black letters at the top of the page. The color drains from her face. Her jaw trembles. She looks up at me, absolute horror finally breaking through her arrogant facade. "We never approved your rental application," I state coldly. We took the $100,000 to cover outstanding legal fees, property damage, and the cost of clearing the federal lien. I tap my silver pen against the desk one final time. That, I tell her, is an eviction notice. You have 30 days to get off my property. The eviction notice sits on the desk like a death warrant. Beatrice's knees buckle. She collapses onto the floor, looking up at me, her eyes overflowing with hysterical, manipulative tears. "You can't do this to me, Maya," she wails. "I'm your mother. You are my flesh and blood. You owe me. You have to let us stay in that house for free. It is your fundamental duty to this family." Emma steps forward, placing both hands dramatically over her swollen belly. "Look at me, Maya," she cries. "I'm pregnant. How can you be so heartless? You're actually going to throw a pregnant woman out onto the street." I do not blink. I lean forward, resting my forearms on the desk. "I remember a very specific night exactly 12 years ago," I begin, my voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "It was late November, freezing rain. I was 19, heavily pregnant with Leo, and experiencing severe, terrifying cramps. I dragged myself up your driveway and pounded on your door. I begged for help, for shelter, for just one night." I watched the blood drain from Beatrice's face. "You stood on the other side of that glass panel." I continue, every word razor sharp. "You looked me right in the eyes. You told me I was a filthy embarrassment. And then you reached out and turned the deadbolt. You left a pregnant teenager sobbing in the freezing rain." I open the top drawer of my desk and pull out 2 crisp, unwrinkled $100 bills. I hold them up for a second, then toss them over the edge of the desk. The bills flutter down, landing silently on the floor in front of Beatrice's knees. "Here is $200. I state, my voice like a gavel striking wood. "I am returning the exact amount you threw in my face 12 years ago. Use it to call an Uber." Beatrice remains frozen on the floor. "You have exactly 24 hours to pack your personal belongings and get out of my house." I continue delivering the final verdict. "You will take only your clothes and immediate personal effects. Every piece of furniture, art, and fixture belongs to the estate. Monday morning, the police will arrive to officially seal the property. If you are still inside, you will be arrested for trespassing." The illusion is broken. Beatrice looks up at me one last time, her face a mask of profound, terrified realization. She finally understands that I am immune to her tears. Her guilt trips her toxic maternal bond. Trembling, she reaches out, scrapes her manicured fingernails against the carpet, and picks up the $200. Her pride is shattered. She struggles to her feet, leaning heavily on Emma. They turn and walk in agonizing silence toward the heavy oak doors, their designer clothes looking absurd on their defeated frames. They step out into the hallway. The double doors swing shut with a deep, satisfying thud, sealing them out of my world forever. The oppressive tension vanishes. I let out a long, slow breath. The quiet click of a side door opening draws my attention. Leo steps out from his private lounge, smiling brightly, carrying 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. He sets one down in front of me and looks up with pure, unconditional love. I take the warm mug, returning his smile with one of absolute, unbroken peace. As I take a sip, the camera begins a smooth, deliberate pullout, revealing the immense, imposing scale of my office. Warm, golden afternoon sunlight floods the room in a soft, radiant glow. It has been 6 months since that afternoon. The fallout was absolute. Daniel received a definitive sentence of 10 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. Patricia, after fighting a losing battle, was forced into total bankruptcy and relocated to a crowded state-funded public nursing home. As for Beatrice and Emma, they vacated my property within 24 hours. With their life savings in my corporate accounts, they had nowhere to turn. They were forced to sign a lease at a crumbling, dilapidated apartment complex in the most neglected district of the city, surviving on government welfare checks. Emma, the pampered golden child, became a heavy, inescapable financial burden to a mother whose only currency was ever wealth. They are trapped together in a miserable, squalid reality of their own making. People completely misunderstand the concept of revenge. They assume it requires dramatic screaming matches or public chaos. But true revenge is entirely silent. It is the quiet, relentless dedication to your own growth while everyone else sleeps. It is building your empire in the shadows and letting your massive, undeniable success speak for itself. True revenge is forcing the people who mercilessly trampled you to spend the rest of their miserable lives looking up at you from the absolute bottom of society. They stripped me of everything to protect a lying facade. Now I have used the truth to strip away their facade. The sweetest revenge is when you become the creditor of those who tormented you. Have you ever had to stand up to protect your child against your own flesh and blood? Tell me your story in the comments below.